I still remember the first time I saw Natalie. It was in a dimly lit coffee shop in downtown San Francisco, the scent of roasted beans mingling with the cool autumn air drifting in through the door. She sat alone at a corner table, absorbed in a medical journal, occasionally pushing a stray lock of dark hair behind her ear. Her focused expression made her seem untouchable, yet something about her presence was magnetic. I had always been a confident speaker online, managing social media campaigns with precision and wit, but here, in front of this intriguing woman, I felt like an awkward schoolgirl. My fingers trembled slightly as I lifted my latte, hesitating before stepping toward her. "Is this seat taken?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked up, startled at first, then offered a small, cautious smile. We spoke for hours that day. She told me about her grueling shifts at the hospital, her dreams of making a real difference in patients' lives. I told her about my work from home, the way I could shape narratives and influence brands with just a few keystrokes. The connection was immediate, the kind that makes you forget time exists. I left the cafe that evening with her number scribbled on the back of my receipt, my heart pounding with an excitement I hadn't felt in years. We started meeting regularly, once a week at first, then more frequently. Brunches turned into late-night phone calls, casual walks morphed into lingering goodbyes. At first, I told myself it was just friendship, but deep down, I knew better. One evening, we found ourselves at Ocean Beach, the sky painted in hues of pink and gold. The salty breeze tousled Natalie's hair as she spoke about her fears, the pressure from her family to find a husband, the expectations she felt shackled to. I listened, knowing all too well the burden of living in someone else's mold. Then, she turned to me, eyes reflecting the dimming sunset. "Do you ever feel like you were meant to love someone you're not supposed to?" Her voice was barely audible over the crashing waves. My breath hitched. All the time. And then it happened. A hesitant, searching kiss that started as a whisper but grew into something undeniable. It was as if every unspoken feeling between us had found its voice. I felt her exhale against me, relief and longing woven together. Loving Natalie was both the easiest and the hardest thing I had ever done. We fit together effortlessly, yet every moment was shadowed by the reality of our lives. Our families, our upbringing, the unyielding walls of tradition, they loomed over us like a storm waiting to break. But love is relentless, and soon, we were whispering dreams of a future together, hidden away from prying eyes. Two years into our love story, we made the decision. A wedding, quiet, intimate, and hidden from the world. No grand celebrations, no blessings from family, just us and our unshakable devotion. We drove to a small coastal town, where the cliffs met the waves, and the sky stretched endlessly above us. Our officiant, a kind stranger who asked no questions, guided us through our vows as the wind carried our whispered promises into the horizon. Natalie's hands trembled as she slid the simple silver band onto my finger, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I will love you, always, even in the dark," she whispered. "Even in the dark," I echoed, sealing our fate with a kiss that tasted of salt and forever. That night, wrapped in each other's arms in a rented cabin by the sea, we allowed ourselves to dream. A life together, a home, maybe even a child one day. The world did not know about us, but we knew. And that was enough, for now. As years passed, the weight of our hidden marriage grew heavier. Every family gathering, every holiday, every casual conversation turned into a cruel reminder of the lives we were expected to live. "You're not getting any younger, Betty," my mother would say, her voice laced with expectation. "When will you settle down? Find a good husband? Have children?" I would laugh, deflecting with vague answers, but inside, I was screaming. The life they envisioned for me was a cage, and I had long since escaped it, yet I could never tell them. Natalie faced the same scrutiny. At family dinners, her mother would drop unsubtle hints about a handsome doctor she should meet. Her father would pat her shoulder, grinning, "A woman as beautiful as you won't stay single forever." She would smile, nod, play her part. And then, at night, she would crumble into my arms, her body shaking with silent sobs. "I hate this," she whispered one night, her face buried against my neck. "I hate lying. I hate pretending." I held her tighter, pressing my lips to her hair. "I know, baby. But one day, it won't have to be this way. One day, we'll have our own family, and none of this will matter." We clung to that hope, desperate and fragile, as the world continued to demand lives we refused to live. The idea of adopting a child became more than just a dream. It became our secret beacon of hope in the midst of the uncertainty that clouded our days. Every night, as the house settled into silence, Natalie and I would lie side by side in bed, scrolling through adoption websites, our fingers grazing the cold screen as we searched for possibilities. There was something comforting in the glow of the phone screen in the dark. It wasn't just the process that excited us, but the thought of building a life, a family, from love and hope. The idea of being parents became an escape from the world that so often made us feel invisible. It felt like a chance to create something meaningful, something pure amidst the chaos. "I want a little girl," Natalie murmured one evening, her voice soft, almost wistful. She was staring at a picture of a child on one of the adoption pages, her eyes distant. "Someone we can teach to be strong, to never hide who she is." I smiled, tracing a finger over the edge of the phone screen. "A little girl sounds wonderful," I said, imagining the joy a child would bring. "But honestly, I just want them to know they're loved. No matter what." The thought of a small child running through our home, her giggles filling every corner, warmed my heart. I imagined that warmth blossoming in every moment, from late-night feedings to family dinners, the love growing in ways we never expected. But as much as we dreamt, the reality of adoption felt overwhelming. The process was complicated, expensive, and fraught with unknowns. There were endless forms, home studies, interviews. And then, there was the reality that we couldn't even openly declare our marriage without facing potential rejection. We were both keenly aware of the world's judgment, and the fear of being turned away because of who we were stung deep. The hesitation was there, lingering in the back of my mind. But the longing? It only grew stronger. With each passing day, the idea of having a family of our own, one not bound by biology but by love, seemed like a beacon we couldn't turn away from. And then, there was Will. I first noticed him when Natalie spoke of him casually one evening over dinner, a slight smile on her face as she mentioned how charming and enigmatic he was. At first, I dismissed it. Just a colleague, someone Natalie worked with, someone I didn't need to think twice about. But as the weeks went on, Will began to make more frequent appearances in her conversations, his name woven into stories with an enthusiasm I hadn't heard from her in a long time. His laughter, his intelligence, the way he made her feel understood. These were the things she mentioned often. At first, it didn't seem like anything alarming. She talked about him like she would any colleague, but with an odd warmth that I couldn't quite ignore. At first, I brushed it off, thinking I was overthinking it. But then came the way she looked at her phone when his name appeared on the screen, the softness in her voice when she spoke of him, and the light in her eyes that I hadn't seen in months. I tried to convince myself that I was being paranoid, that I had no reason to feel threatened. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, something subtle and powerful was happening. I tried to keep my distance, not wanting to give voice to the suspicion I was beginning to feel. I had always trusted Natalie, and I didn't want to doubt her. But the idea of her lingered in the back of my mind, haunting me like a shadow I couldn't outrun. "I don't know what's wrong with me," Natalie admitted one evening, her voice low and conflicted. We were sitting on the couch, the TV playing in the background, but neither of us were watching. "I think I'm starting to feel something for him. It scares me." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I froze, trying to understand what she was saying. My mind raced, the dream of becoming parents together suddenly feeling fragile, as if it could be taken away in a moment. I could tell she was conflicted, torn between something she didn't fully understand and the life we had been building. But I also knew that the lines between friendship and something deeper were often blurry. And this felt dangerous. I wanted to be understanding, to support her through whatever feelings she was grappling with. But I couldn't deny the cold knot of fear in my stomach. Would this be the thing that pulled us apart? Would this be the temptation we couldn't overcome? The question gnawed at me in the quiet moments, and I couldn't escape it. Was our dream of parenthood going to slip through our fingers because of something, or someone, we never saw coming? A woman knows. It's a quiet kind of knowing, a feeling that settles deep in your gut and whispers the truth before your mind can even catch up. The small shifts in behavior, her long, distracted silences, the way her phone was always face down on the table now, the way she would suddenly become quiet when I entered the room. These were the signs, the unspoken messages I couldn't ignore. Natalie was slipping. I could feel it in my bones, like a cold wind on the back of my neck, but I didn't want to believe it. Instead, I buried myself in the things that had once given me comfort, things that still carried the weight of our shared dreams, our adoption papers, the home study meetings, the phone calls with social workers and lawyers. It was all becoming too much to handle, especially with the distance growing between us, but I clung to it. Our dream of a child was still there, a fragile light in the distance. It was the one thing that kept me from falling apart. I pored over the paperwork late into the night, keeping myself busy with the bureaucratic maze that adoption seemed to be. I focused on the logistics, finding the right agencies that would approve us, researching the best schools, imagining the day we would bring our child home. I told myself I couldn't let go of that vision, even if Natalie was slipping away from me. I thought if I just kept moving forward, if I focused on the child we had always dreamed of, I could keep the rest of our lives together from crumbling. But the cracks were there, forming in the spaces between us. We no longer shared the same quiet moments together. There was no more easy conversation as we sat over coffee in the mornings, no more laughing about our shared inside jokes. There was only tension, unspoken words hanging in the air like smoke. I watched her, wondering if I was imagining it, if I was reading too much into everything. But then there were the small things, the way she hesitated when I touched her, the way her eyes avoided mine, the way she seemed distant even when she was standing right next to me. A woman knows, but she doesn't always know what to do with that knowing. So, I kept moving forward. I kept pretending I didn't feel the slow dissolution of the bond that had once been so strong. I told myself that we could still be parents, that I could still be the mother I had always dreamed of being. But the truth was, with each passing day, the ground beneath me trembled. I was walking on shaky ground, unsure if I could keep us from falling apart. Three times. 3 nights. That's all it took for my world to unravel. The first time she told me, her voice was trembling. There was a quiver in her tone, like she was about to shatter. Natalie had always been the stronger one, the one who kept things together, who could carry us both when the weight of the world felt too much. But that night, she couldn't hold it in any longer. "I've made a terrible mistake," she whispered, her eyes welling up with tears. I've been with Will. It's been 3 times. 3 nights, and I don't know what happened." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood frozen, unable to breathe, unable to think. 3 nights. I could feel the space between us widen with each syllable she spoke. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I couldn't. My heart was breaking, and I was too stunned to react. She was crying now, shaking with guilt and regret, her voice breaking as she begged for my forgiveness. "I never wanted to hurt you, I swear. I never meant for this to happen." But there was no apology that could undo what had already been done. She had crossed a line, and even as she wept in front of me, the damage was irreversible. There was no way to take back what had been shared with someone else. There was no way to undo the trust that had been shattered, piece by piece, until it was nothing more than a pile of rubble between us. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. The house, once filled with laughter and hope, now felt cold and hollow. The dream of becoming parents, of building a life together, seemed impossible now. How could we even talk about bringing a child into this mess? How could I trust her to be the mother of our child when she had betrayed me so completely? "I love you," she said, her voice cracking, but the words felt empty now, hollow. The love we had built our lives on felt like it had evaporated, leaving nothing behind but an ache in my chest that would not go away. But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I was too hurt, too confused, to speak. Her tears stained my shirt as she clung to me, but all I could feel was the emptiness inside me. How could I rebuild from this? How could I forgive her? More than that, how could I trust her again? The thought of our child, our dream of parenthood, felt like it was slipping further and further away. In the days that followed, Natalie tried to make amends, tried to explain, but I couldn't hear her. The betrayal was too raw, too fresh. And as I looked at her, I realized something deep and painful. I wasn't sure I could ever trust her again. The phone call came on a quiet afternoon, a moment that should have been filled with joy. "You've been approved to adopt." The words echoed in my ears, but they felt hollow. This was the moment we had dreamed about for so long, the culmination of everything we had worked toward, the child we would bring into our lives, the family we could finally build. Yet, as the woman on the other end of the line congratulated me, I could only hear the thundering pulse of my own broken heart. I pressed the phone to my ear with trembling hands, trying to hide the pain, but the joy I had imagined for this moment was replaced with a bitter ache. the approval meant nothing now. Not without Natalie by my side in the way she once was, whole, present, loving. Natalie stood in the doorway, her eyes red and swollen from crying, her face ashen. She had been waiting for me to return, but I wasn't sure what either of us were waiting for anymore. She knew. She knew what this moment was supposed to mean. But nothing felt right. The dream of parenthood we had shared was now tainted, like a beautiful painting ruined by an ugly, permanent smear. "You got the call?" Her voice trembled, her words cautious, as if she were waiting for me to lash out, to scream at her, to finally break. I nodded numbly, staring at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. The words felt like they were trapped in my chest. "You betrayed me. You shattered me. How could you do this?" But nothing came out. Instead, I was frozen, caught between the past and the present, between the love I still felt for her and the overwhelming weight of betrayal that threatened to crush me. Natalie took a tentative step forward, her gaze soft, filled with a mixture of shame and something else, something deeper. Regret, yes. But there was also desperation, a raw, vulnerable yearning for something that I wasn't sure I could give anymore. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely audible, her hands trembling as they reached out toward me. "I know I've broken you. And I'm so sorry. I would take it all back if I could. I would change it all. But I can't undo what I've done." She reached for me again, but I stepped back, the space between us growing, not just in distance, but in the gulf that had formed between who we had been and who we were now. "You can't just say you're sorry," I managed to choke out, my voice thick with the weight of the past weeks. "You can't just undo this. It's not that simple." I could feel the tears stinging behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Instead, I held on to the dream we once had, our child, our family, and I asked myself the unthinkable question, can we still be salvaged? For the first time, I truly didn't know. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is the ultimate act of love. Those words, once just a vague sentiment, became the very foundation I built myself upon in the months that followed. But it wasn't easy. It was slow, painful work, like trying to stitch a broken heart back together with nothing but thread and hope. Natalie and I rebuilt, piece by piece, every single day. There were moments when the pain was so raw, so fresh, that it felt as if we would never be whole again. The trust that had once been the bedrock of our relationship had been shattered, and putting it back together felt like an impossible task. I would wake in the night, my chest tight, haunted by the images of what had been lost. But there were moments of light. Small gestures of tenderness when Natalie held me close, when she whispered, "I'm sorry," and I could hear in her voice the depth of her sorrow. When I saw the way she held herself now, not with the confident arrogance of the woman she had been, but with a quiet humility, as if she knew she had to earn me back, earn our love again. Forgiveness wasn't something that happened overnight. It wasn't a switch I could flick. But over time, I saw something in Natalie, a vulnerability that had never been there before. She didn't just want to fix what had been broken. She wanted to be better. And I couldn't help but let the walls I'd built slowly crumble. And then, there was our son. The first time I held him in my arms, the world shifted. All the pain, all the struggle, seemed to fade for a moment. I looked down at him, his small, warm body nestled against mine, and in that moment, everything made sense again. We had fought for him. We had fought for this family. And somehow, despite everything, love had found its way back into our lives. Natalie and I stood together in the quiet hospital room, our son sleeping peacefully in my arms, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine. For a brief moment, there was no past, no betrayal, no fear. There was only the present, the three of us. As our families, once rigid and unyielding, came forward with tentative acceptance, we realized that love, true, undeniable love, had the power to change everything. It wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing to move forward, to create something new from the wreckage of what had come before. Natalie and I stood together, our son between us, knowing that the road ahead would still be difficult. But we had come this far. And together, we would continue to build something strong, something real. A family, imperfect but ours. If you like this story and felt connected, please subscribe. Thanks for watching Gaby's Cheating Stories. See you on the next one.